reason I use the term Islamist, the reason I think it's a valuable term to use, a means of separating one camp from the other, is I just don't think that if you're taking people who we want to have on our side in this struggle, and the people who we have to hope at some point will be able to reform, if not the entirety of their religion, at least the way that it exists in the West, that we have to have some space where they can do that. And I think that the distinction between Islam and Islamist allows us to identify the people who actually want to impose Sharia on the West versus the people who are Muslims, whether they're just culturally Muslim or they have a different way of interpreting their religion, but who want to live here and live among us as Americans, as Westerners, and not be identified as Sharia Muslims. Am I confident that that will happen? That those people will actually succeed? That they can actually reform their religion? No, not particularly. But I think we have to give them a chance. I'm not completely convinced they can't do it either. But I just don't see what the sense is of taking your natural allies, the people that you want on your side, the people who have in their community actually contributed to our counterterrorism, and tell them that the problem is their religion.
What do we do about the non-Islamist Muslim? And after we have expressed our support for Zuhdi Jasser, then where do we go? I'm of course exaggerating. There are indeed the people who worked with the prosecution in the case of the blind sheikh, and there are many others who work, but they work under the cover of darkness. They work not wanting to be recognized precisely because the situation is what it is within Islam. The question about giving people the space to reform the religion cannot really be answered until we understand how religions reform in the first place. And do we reform the religion of Islam by pretending that it is other than what it is? Or do we reform the religion of Islam by confronting the elements of it that are outrageous to universally accepted notions of human rights and call upon Muslims who do want to live according to universally recognized notions of human rights to fight against those ideas? There aren't really very many historical precedents for Reformation in religion, but of course the main one is the Reformation. So let me put it to you this way. Imagine if in 1517 that instead of nailing the 95 Theses to the wall of to the door of the church in Wittenberg, that Martin Luther had said, "How dare you suggest that the Catholic Church teaches the primacy of the Pope and the doctrines of transubstantiation and the perpetual virginity of Mary? You must be a venomous Catholic hater, a Catholophobe. And I stand for the true Catholicism, which has none of that in it." Now, that would have been absurd, because obviously the church did teach all those things, and those were the things, among others, that Martin Luther objected to. And Martin Luther did not set out to reform the church, whatever one may think of the necessity or the veracity of the charges. All that is beside the point. But he did not set out to reform the church by pretending it was otherwise than what it was. He set out to reform the church by confronting the doctrines he thought were false and calling upon people to discard them. Now, that ended up creating a schism, of course, a number of schisms, such that there are Catholics and Protestants in the world today. And maybe that's what would happen in Islam. But the problem is also compounded by the fact that Islam has a doctrine of religious deception. It not only has doctrines of warfare and subjugation of unbelievers that are universal among the sects and schools of law in Islam, but it also has doctrines of deception. And that makes it doubly difficult because, unfortunately, I think, with all the best intentions, Andy, by trying to separate out the supremacist and martial elements of Islam from Islam, is enabling the deceivers, because the deceivers sound just like reformers, or almost just like reformers. they come around, and actually you can turn on the television any given moment and see them, and they'll say, Islam doesn't teach any of this, and we reject all this, and we abhor terrorism, and it's really the problem is Islamophobia and unjustified suspicion of the peaceful Muslim community. And invariably, when you start to look into the people who are saying this, they're connected to one or another Muslim Brotherhood group. And the Muslim Brotherhood, of course, as you all I'm certain know, is dedicated in its own words to eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. And what better way to do that but to render us complacent in the face of the reality of this threat and make it such that we are afraid to speak about it in its full dimensions, because we think, on the one hand, that if we do that, we will be charged with being bigoted, racist, and hateful, and our professional prospects will be dim. And, I certainly know that. I'm 10 years an Islamophobe now, and I can't get another job. But also that we will be discouraging the few actual genuine Muslim reformers will be hurting Zudi. And so for those two reasons, we cannot speak about this problem honestly. And so